right. Well, Jim, thanks for joining the podcast today. You're in Raleigh, RTP, somewhere down there?
I'm actually in Asheville, North Carolina.
Oh, you're on the other side of the state. How'd you work that out? All those other nerds are out there, power nerds are out east.
Oh yeah. Well, I came up through Eaton Care, which is in Arden, North Carolina, near Asheville. So I
Okay.
ended up kind of remote. Let's put it that way.
Well, Asheville is, to be fair, relatively remote. The funny thing is, I lived in Charlotte for like 2.5 years after college and never once made it to Asheville. It's one of my great shames of living that close by and never seeing Biltmore. There's a Range Rover driving school over there. Never did that. Never went
Right.
and bought furniture. Never did any of the things you're supposed to do in Asheville.
Yeah. It's always the places that are close by. I used to live in Batavia, near Buffalo and Rochester in New York, and we never got up to Niagara Falls as often as we should have.
Well, at least you saw it, though. That would be a crime to be
Yeah.
that close and never see it.
Yeah.
Um,
Twice in a decade. So
I saw it once in Superman, and then was so inspired we had to go and see it in real life. But yeah,
nice.
it's a big waterfall, right?
Oh yeah.
All right. So, as astounding as this study on vacations is going for this podcast, what do you do at Eaton? So, set the tone there.
Right. So right now I'm a global connectivity product manager. And so what that means is that I try to organize all of the activities around connecting our devices. We're trying to kind of move to a terminology of power management. So turning a UPS or a PDU into a communicating device that you could then manage remotely.
So we know that you guys have been doing that for some time, but I think maybe in the industry it's less widely known because
Mhm.
customers or people in the industry, practitioners, might think of a PDU as sort of a static power delivery unit or a backup battery unit as a backup battery unit that takes over in the
Right.
event of power loss. But you guys have had NICs that could be added to the UPSs and then NICs embedded on the PDUs for years now. So what's the latest there in terms of customer awareness? So start there.
Yeah, so we've had the capability to do it for a while, and it was kind of started off as basic communication, so just reporting information over SNMP. But as maybe over the last decade, we've seen increasing adoption using these connected technologies, and we've seen increasing needs for authorization and cybersecurity requirements for these devices. So we're turning these UPSs and PDUs, which kind of used to be relatively dumb uh, devices, into things that act and behave more like your server, like your switch.
So how is that as a shift? Because the monitoring software packages or security packages are typically procured through some other function within the company
Mhm.
other than traditional infrastructure like your racks, your PDUs, and your batteries. How does that work as you get into these organizations?
Right. So we take the stance of being vendor agnostic. So if you take, there's more and more information that people are trying to use, especially in PDUs. There's current voltage information. There's a ton of telemetry at the outlet level, and we take that and we integrate that up into SNMP or MQTT or some other monitoring protocols, and anything could monitor that. But when you start getting into the realm of, okay, how do I configure that? All right, SNMP v1 is not encrypted. That's not acceptable to a lot of our customers nowadays. So they move into SNMP v3. And how do I get logged in and make sure that I am who I said I am? How do I configure SNMP v3 to utilize the encryptions and make sure it's secure? And then, we're running these on embedded devices. So there's a processor behind this thing. And in many cases, devices like this are really small Linux operating systems. So it just provides an opportunity for an attacker to get their hands on this processor, insert some malware into it, and now they've got a place to dwell within your system. So it's more important than ever that we protect that platform from attack, to provide the kind of advanced features that would integrate with a generic monitoring system, whether it's someone else's or what Eaton offers.
So it's funny because I was at Veeam's customer conference last week, and they put out their first ransomware study. It's a 2022 study that covered 1,000 organizations, I think, and they were talking about ransomware specifically and how that gets into the organization, and then what it does once it's in there. It seems like still the number one vector is people clicking on stuff they shouldn't in email, right? A link or a PDF or Anna Kournikovas, whatever, how this stuff started, so long ago. And that largely the ransomware that gets in that way is attacking the backups. So they're going straight for the throat. But it seems to me that, as you talk about these other devices that are out there possibly on the network, that there could be a lot of legacy gear like that would be easy to infiltrate, whether initiated through a phishing attack or physically, I suppose, if someone has access to your gear. But what do the vectors look like to you in terms of what Eaton's trying to protect against?
Right. So you mentioned social engineering, phishing attacks. Yeah, I totally agree. That's still the number one way that people are getting into these systems. Um, and the best way to protect from that is really education, trying to make sure that your operators are doing the right thing. You know, good security hygiene, as it were. But there are other ways for people to get in, and there are inherent vulnerabilities in a number of authentication schemes. So, it may be unclear how an attacker initially gets into a system. And I think that those attackers, they're trading secrets on the dark web. They've got all these backdoor tools, and they don't want us to find out about those. So the one strategy is you get in and you find something within that system that you can infect and get that backdoor so that you don't have to expose, your golden cow that's providing you access into any system that you want.
So go back to Eaton's points of connection on PDUs, battery units, because that's not a typical place where people think about security, I don't think.
Absolutely.
Why are those good places, or what's the scope of coverage if we start with those two things as concepts?
Yeah, I think, there's a reason why devices are being exponentially connected to one another in today's world. There's a real benefit and added value to being able to communicate and automate a lot of our daily functions. If you think about, just take it outside of the data center, or the IT closet. In your house, you're connecting your doorbell. You've got Alexa.
Your device is ready for setup.
There we go.
Yeah, you kicked
And
off your own.
yeah, that was not planned. So, I read about the guy just walking around doing his thing. All of a sudden, his Google Ring started talking to him and said, "Hey, I'm a white hat hacker, and as a service, I'm hacking into people's rings to inform them that there's a vulnerability." So, a horrific story of parents waking up and some not white hat hacker is talking to their kid through
Oh
the
yeah, through
baby
the baby
monitor,
cam. Yeah, yeah.
right? So you extend that to all the smart devices that are in a facility within an organization. I mean, your smart coffee machine might be the target for an attack and the vector in. So they're looking at all the devices, and power devices are just kind of one of a class of devices that are getting increasing capabilities in communication and are becoming increasingly more desirable to attack. So we're kind of just we're just one tree in a forest. And we did get a lot of attention recently, where they called out some specific vulnerabilities within the power distribution industry, and send out an advisement to kind of like make sure you're securing your UPSs, make sure you're securing your PDUs, because just like you said, not a lot of people are thinking about these as devices that could be utilized in a malicious act.
So, it's funny. So let's start with PDUs. So basically a power strip, right? At sort of the fundamental level.
Mm-hmm.
And there's all sorts of intelligence built in or can be built in to do much more than that. But just so that we set the level for anyone that doesn't really follow this industry so closely. When did they start getting any sort of network connectivity? How long has that been around?
Yeah, it's interesting because I just was having a conversation with two engineers at Eaton when we were talking about introducing cloud capabilities to our PDUs. And they were kind of laughing because they're like, didn't we talk to each other about 20 years ago about doing this? So it's
Okay.
not a new idea. And I think we've had basic connectivity really for the last 2 decades. It's just kind of a continuing evolution to say, hey, these customers want to do zero touch provisioning. So how do we add that in? How do we create capabilities for you to commission these devices over DHCP, or okay, we need to know what time it is. It's more and more important to know what time it is. So adding support for NTP servers, and just over time, we start to look more and more like some of these enterprise level devices.
Right. Okay. So it starts out probably over some sort of serial cable or something, way back when to get these
Hmm.
things
Right.
touching other infrastructure. Now we're at the point where there's a LAN port on the thing, so we can plug in and connect it over the wire. And to your point, we're asking, or customers are asking for more manageability, more simplicity, more features. And so you're continuing to develop out the little computer that controls each one of these times however many are in a rack, if you've got two in a rack for redundancy, and then however many racks, whatever. There could be a lot of these just PDUs in a single data center. And just like we experience here with different NAS providers or connected storage devices, that a lot of times the simplicity that goes into it ends up opening up security threat vectors, not intentionally, of course, but
Right.
features will be enabled, UPnP. I mean, just things that make the usability easier and better for the consumer market, especially. But in the enterprise now, if you have hackers that have availability to access your PDUs and can just trash power to your thing, I mean, that's not good, right?
Absolutely not. Yeah. So I mean, there's two levels of threat. One is that if I can get access and control that, I'm controlling the power to your devices. So it's a form of denial of service
Mm-hmm.
attack. And then there's another level where I can just sit there quietly and watch inside your system without having to worry about firewalls, and I can gain a lot of intelligence. So one of the things that we try to be good stewards and try to educate, make sure that we have secure products, but also educate people about cybersecurity. And one of the things that um, we talk about is making sure that you only use encrypted algorithms by default. So make sure that there's always an S at the end of that algorithm,
Mm-hmm.
so that someone can't just sit there and sniff your network traffic if they happen to find that smart coffee machine and have some dwell time within your system.
Yeah, I mean, geez, just thinking about the power though, because we get so worried about protecting VMs and backing up data and file recovery and all these sorts of things that that somebody like Veeam would be talking about. We spend very little time, I think, as an industry talking about the blocking and tackling of just like the real basic stuff of how are we protecting the power. And I think most orgs would answer it and say, well, I've got badge access or hid access into the data center, and there's 7 people that have access, and as long as one of them doesn't come in and go rogue and start turning stuff off, then we're covered. And what you're saying is that you very well may not be covered.
Absolutely, there's a risk.
So have you seen this? Have customers or like what do we know about the threat to PDUs and to power systems generally?
I think that luckily we don't know of any in vivo attacks that have been successful. Where they've actually targeted a power system and threatened to turn it off or something like that. And but that's not to say that there are not active attempts at the moment to do that. And so again, that phishing attempt, clicking on that suspicious link in an email, there are emails right now being sent out attempting to gain access to power devices. So it is happening, but I don't think there has something that has been catastrophic or made the news just yet. We did a story with a company called Grandeur Housing, a success story with a company called Grandeur Housing in Canada, and they unfortunately were the victim of ransomware attacks several times, and they were able to recover from backup, and so. But they were worried that their attack, it seemed like someone was targeting them pretty heavily, and they were worried that the attacker would figure out how to get their backups. So, we worked with them to develop a kind of an air gap for their data backups, and we utilized our UPS and PDU and our intelligent power management software and as a solution to create this air gap, and so we were able to essentially initiate the graceful shutdown of a Veeam virtual machine that was accomplishing this backup, and then we were able to kind of like turn off the power to these devices and create that air gap so that while these attackers were active in the system, they wouldn't be able to find that. So it's kind of an interesting example where we were able to, as a power provider, really offer a good service from a cybersecurity standpoint into a more IT enterprise level area, and it really had to do with us being able to turn things on and turn things off.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it's not a way that I've really thought about you guys before. So this is a fun conversation. I mean, very much we know your stuff. Our lab is full of it, and we've got all the little toys here from DeCamp over in Raleigh that are. Every time we post a social video, by the way, Kevin jams these little dinosaurs in our servers because he doesn't fill them up with SSD, so he puts a little dinosaur in there. And like the first 6 replies to our videos are always like, dino toy, those are so cool. But anyway, so we think about you guys from the device standpoint, whether it's the PDUs or battery units, but the connectivity that you're talking about that enables these other use cases to air gap your backup isn't something that I've thought a lot about in terms of Eaton's perspective, and is actually the power messaging. So we hear the air gap one quite a bit, but the leverage power controls to get to the air gap backup, that's kind of a new angle, for me. So that's pretty interesting. do you have integration? I mean, I know IPM a little bit, but I'm not an expert. Do you have automation or scripting or something to help automate these and then also bring the stuff back up in the event of a crisis?
Yeah, absolutely. And the real reason that IPM evolved into what it is today was the idea that I'm 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 running a regular server and a standalone server, and it's relatively easy for me to plug a USB cable into that server, connect the UPS, the battery backup device, and then have some kind of a one-one relationship where once the UPS is low battery, the server can shut down gracefully. And you guys see that that's native functionality in a lot of operating systems. But when you start talking about virtual machines, it gets a lot more complicated. And if I crash physical hardware that's running a virtual environment, there are a lot of things that can go wrong, and a lot of opportunities for data to get corrupted. So we developed IPM software so that we could, based on power events, we could automate the graceful shutdown of a virtual environment, get the VMs gracefully shut down, if needed, shut down the host, and then once we got power back and certain things were satisfied, so it's all built on kind of a general automation system where we take events, we turn them into triggers, and then we act upon that. So let's say once you get power restored, you don't necessarily want to turn your server on right away. So we wait until the UPS battery charges up to maybe 50%. Then we also check the temperature, because when power goes out, sometimes the heat can get pretty high. And then we go ahead after all those triggers are satisfied. We can restart that device, restart the server, and have all the virtual machines come back up in the order that you want them to come back up.
Right. So that's more of a traditional failure where you
Mm-hmm.
set this logic, right, in a power failure. And then from the cybersecurity perspective, for something like we ran our backup finished, and now we're going to power off these machines so that they're air gapped and then bring them up again, half an hour before the backup runs again. Something like that could be a use case as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so it may have been a little over engineered, but yeah, we were able to take the SNMP data from the Veeam virtual machine and kind of integrate that and turn that into some custom triggers so that we could tell. Obviously their backup was scheduled, so we knew that part. But then once the backup was done, we could bring the whole system down and really reduce the kind of the temporal attack surface area.
Huh. Well, that's interesting. I mean, given the data I just shared with you, that the backups were the first thing these guys are the most common thing that they're attacking in a ransomware attack. So you're monitoring or capable of monitoring the PDUs, the battery units, the UPSs. I do recall, though, too, if you went in our lab, you would notice we have no doors on any of our racks, but that you also have some access controls available in IPM as well for door opens, and I mean, you've got environmentals and other things, but you've got some other sensor capabilities for the physical bit too, right?
Right. So we natively have the capability to monitor some dry contacts on our environmental monitoring probe. So you plug this in, you plug the probe into the network card, you get temperature and humidity for free. There are two terminal blocks, and you can wire other things into those terminal blocks like a door sensor. And it's just basically a switch. When someone opens the door, the switch opens, and that change is detected within the IPM environment. And then you can automate things. To the degree that you could completely shut down your entire environment if someone opened the wrong door. Say, oh, someone's not supposed to be opening that door. And
Yeah, some sort of emergency reaction, right?
right, right. And the level on top of that is that we offer tan lock door locks, so that we can actually kind of integrate with that authentication and authorization system, and make sure that only the right people are allowed access to that door. And then kind of interlock that with, if someone that does not have access somehow forces the door open, that could also be detected.
Interesting. Probably more effective in labs that leave the doors on the racks, though.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. We're talking about kind of data center stuff, but one of the big trends we're seeing is this proliferation of edge computing now, with more and more analytics being done at the edge, more stuff being pushed into retail from a POS standpoint, but also surveillance and self-checkout and AI at the edge and all this other stuff. Understanding that we haven't talked about this, and I don't know what your thoughts are on edge at all, but I'm curious though, what sort of dynamics you see there from a threat level. Certainly physical, maybe a little more risky, but just what changes for you at the edge?
Yeah, the edge, has kind of evolved from what I heard was remote office, back office, IT closets, and you're absolutely right. They're just doing more and more. There are more closets. They're doing things at the edge in these closets, and I know have the term edge has been commoditized. Some people have a negative reaction to that, but I think it's a good description of what's happening, and it's creating more problems for IT managers because there's more complexity. There's more for them to manage. So we deal a lot with school districts, banks, retail, grocery, where they have hundreds or even thousands of locations, and typically there's like one person that's managing 500 locations. So you can't do that without some advanced communication capability. I'm working with someone right now, and somehow in the commissioning phase, all of their local UPS settings were set to 90% threshold for shutdown, which probably not a good idea, right?
A little tight.
Yeah.
A little tight, yeah.
So, with our capability to communicate to the UPSs and the network cards, REST API using HTTPS, so a nice secure way for you to control these devices, we're able to kind of script a way for us to take all 500 of those UPSs and set them back down to 20%.
Well, from an operational standpoint, that's useful, I would say, rather than having to send some IT tech out to all those field locations, and some of which, too, as we're seeing the explosion in 5G, all these little compute systems hung off off of 5G comm poles, whatever they are, wildly expensive to service each one of those with a human, right?
Absolutely.
And maybe not even possible, right? And that's the other thing too, is that as edge contorts itself, and I agree, it's somewhat misleading when you just bucket the whole thing, but like the rugged edge use cases where it might be a helicopter ride or something to get to these spots, but yet they can still set up a little 5G or something so that they can still gain, or SATCOM or something, they can still gain some communication. But they're very hard to get to physically.
Absolutely, or there's security concerns. I know in some banks, you can't just send a tech out. It's got to be someone with the right credentials, the right training, and it's very hard to get that person to the right place at the right time when they're needed.
Right. No, I saw Ocean's 11. It's very difficult to get into the highly secure areas.
Right.
Can't be done, and then if it's done, that's why you need the sensor data to tell you if someone's hacking or getting physically control of your stuff.
I mean, luckily there's only one George Clooney, so we can't hack everybody, break into every single bank.
I suspect he can't do it himself by on his own. No, he would need a team of at least 10 more people. Um, so it's interesting then as Eaton continues to evolve, you continue to evolve by adding more technology, and now it's going to be up to, I guess, software innovation to continue to expand your capabilities in these network products. What's the emphasis going forward for this little portion of the business?
Yeah, there are probably four emphases, if
Okay.
you will. I just created a new word,
Yeah.
but one in it, which is monitoring and visibility, making sure as much data is available to the customers as possible, really from a ground up, from that UPS device, PDU device, making sure that everything in there travels all the way up to the network card, up to a software application, out to the cloud. Then being able to control that and manage that, so that, like we described, being able to, if you for some reason, um, you have a number of problem sites with dirty power, you can on the fly change some voltage sensitivity
Hmm.
settings at the UPS level and ameliorate that problem without having to send out a tech to 300 different locations. And then, something that we're really pushing toward is a predictive maintenance model and a life cycle management, because we talked about how hard it is to just commission, to install, to configure these devices, to protect them from malicious attack or non-malicious attacks, such as a mistake or somebody opening the wrong door. Um, but we haven't even talked about, okay, the logistics of changing batteries. And
Hmm.
so, how do we revolutionize how we improve the uptime of these devices, so we can predict when a battery might fail. We can get a battery out to you for replacement within a margin of error, so that you can replace the battery without dropping the load. So those are things that we're currently working on in the realm of predictive maintenance and optimization. Um, and then general automation. So automation, we're all asked to do more, and there don't seem to be a lot more people to do those things.
Yeah,
So
very true.
we've got to get smarter, and we've got to automate more. And so, um, we've been pushing in the realm of zero touch provisioning, being able to script actions, and the real benefit that, I mean, obviously there's operational benefit, but one of the real benefits is, from a cybersecurity standpoint, less mistakes are made. And so, one of the things we talked a little bit earlier about, okay, what are the big ways that attackers are gaining access? Um, and one of the big ways is that the application, the software, has not been updated in over a year. So there are published vulnerabilities, almost like a guide or a handbook for an attacker to get onto your system and to bypass your security. Um, so just leave it open. Like I created a desktop. I opened a port so I get a remote desktop. Close that port. It's been open for a year, and somebody finally figured it out. That's another way people get in. So automating these tasks not only saves us time and money, but it also helps us make less mistakes and help make our system more secure.
So, I mean, a lot of the stuff you're talking about are kind of higher level IT challenges too, in terms of provisioning other devices on the network. Do you guys want to? Is it your vision then to protect more than just your Eaton gear on that's within an infrastructure?
Well, yes, we want to make sure that for these features that we are not the weakest link in your chain of
Okay.
cybersecurity. We want
So
to
you
be the
definitely
strongest
you don't
link.
want to introduce any new risk to organizations.
Right, right.
Okay.
And I mean, there's definitely opportunities out there. Um, with our visual power management software, it's very advanced software. It can do a lot of things, as a kind of a data center infrastructure management level tool. And so, there's no reason why we couldn't introduce features such as where we kind of look at network traffic, use machine learning algorithms, detect malicious activities. But I think that space is really being filled by other niche players. And
Hmm.
so, kind of what we want to do is we want to accentuate, actually not accentuate, but to make visible the cybersecurity strengths that we have,
Okay.
and to help to provide value to our customers by offering them ways to make their system more secure. But you got to have the right tools, and so we're going to partner with other companies and to create alliances, technology alliances, to kind of offer that added protection at a system level.
Well, and ideally bubble up your information into other software platforms that they're using to visualize some of this already, whether it's, like VROPS and VMware, or like you said, there's probably a dozen or more point products that are real security focused, to
Mhm.
be able to funnel some of your data into those to help provide that fuller picture. I would think would provide a lot of value, because if we know IT admins, especially those that are getting stretched out with expanding task lists, monitoring a lot of systems can be challenging.
Absolutely. You have
And so then it doesn't
5,000
happen, right?
alarms. What do
Yeah,
I do?
well, that too. So what do you have to do on the partnering? You just talked about it a little bit, but what do you have to do on the partnering front to help get more of the Eaton visibility, or your visibility into your components up and into some of these other systems, dashboards, whatever it is?
Yeah, so we have a number of integrations with other platforms. So IPM has an integration with vSphere, and we also work with VxRail. So we integrate with VxRail and allow you to gracefully shut down a VxRail cluster, which I think at this point is we're the only power management player that can do that. Um, a lot of our other integrations are not as technical.
Hmm.
They're more marketing level, where we talk about what we can do with um, Cisco, or what we can do with HPE.
Okay. Um, One of the things that strikes me as we talk through all of this is the relative cost of like adding the network card to a UPS. It's not, I don't want to quote pricing because I don't even know what it is, but it's not that expensive. And these capabilities that you're talking about are really quite robust. In all of our reviews, like we just did a review of the 5PX Gen 2. And so we get into a lot of this manageability stuff, and people that are in the trenches dealing with their UPS systems all the time will know this and understand it. But I think as you go further up the organization, there's a general lack of knowledge around what these capabilities are and the relative expense associated with them. So not all that expensive. Is the attach rate growing pretty rapidly on the network card for at least on the UPS side? What does that look like?
Absolutely. We've seen significant growth in the attachment rate for networked UPSs. So the PDUs are a little different because their connectivity is embedded. You can't necessarily easily pull it out. It ships with it. So
Mm.
you essentially have a 100% attach rate on these communicating PDUs. But we're selling more communicating PDUs, and with UPSs, what we're seeing is we're selling more bundles,
Okay.
where the network card is either in the box or it's already installed in that UPS, ready to go.
Yeah, oddly enough, I think Kevin did a social media video where he put one of the cards into a UPS. It was like a 12-second install video, right? Of take the clip off, throw it in there, one screw or whatever, and off we go. And
Yep.
people went wild over that, I think, because there's still, I've said it twice now, I think, there's still just a lack of awareness that you can get this much visibility into your infrastructure with a little smart nick, basically. I mean, there's not a ton to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And with our 5PX G2 and the 9PX lithium ion units, those network cards are shipping inside the unit. So you don't even have to unscrew anything or
Yeah,
slip in a
even
card. It's
better.
already ready to go. And that's kind of the trend for all of our units as we refresh them.
All right, well, this is a cool conversation. I mean, like I started, we think a lot of people, I think about you guys as power delivery. I mean, obviously Eaton's a massive corporation, but just in your world of it with the backup batteries and the PDUs and the racks, of which we have all of in our data center upstairs, the physical bits, but the intelligence behind it, I think, is going to be, to your point, the next big differentiator in infrastructure is, okay, I mean, anyone can hold servers and anyone can run power to them, but what else can we do to make these things more valuable? So, I give you guys a lot of credit for continuing to push down that road, and glad we can help, bring some more awareness.
Yeah, thank you for having me.